Hey guys, today's story is about a TTRPG named Paranoia. It's one that a good few of you might be unfamiliar with. This is an old story a friend convinced me to share. For those of you who may not know, Paranoia is a black comedy spoof on classic dystopias as an RPG. It's memed on as being very Looney Tunes and zany and explosive, but we realized there was actually a solid game there with cool lore and stuff and set up a proper campaign. The rulebook called it straight, and that's what we went with. We all talked about the setting, made characters together, and even watched 1984 with some beers and snacks. This is the story of the most horrifying game of Paranoia ever run, and the group of masochists who couldn't get off the ride. The first sign things were going to get a little hardcore was with the GM. He's a guy who has read 1984, Brave New World, We, Anthem, The Giver, Fahrenheit 451, The Hunger Games, A Handmaid's Tale, and everything by Kafka. He's also seen the movies 1984, Logan's Run, Soylent Green, Dark City, and is also a history nut who's extensively studied Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, Fascist Italy, Communist China, the Khmer Rouge, and Vietnam. So needless to say, he has his dystopian credentials set. So naturally, a great choice to run Paranoia. The player characters were all proles from across Alpha Complex. We had different jobs, all basic red clearance, except for one who was orange because he was a part of the American master race, and genetically opposed to communism. And all of our existences were generally awful since Friend Computer saw red in our red clearance and was very cruel and suspicious of us being communists. This led to our job posts changing randomly, fines out of nowhere for subversive behavior, opinions, or thoughts. Our residences would be changed or restricted, the police would be suspicious or outright violent for no apparent reason, and we often had to hide out in the outer wards of Alpha Complex, where power outages and large mutant populations created a smokescreen for regular proles to hide. It wasn't long before we fell into the criminal underworld of smuggling and prostitution, dealing with cigarettes, alcohol, and foodstuffs as a medium of currency, in a society that didn't believe in communist concepts like money. As the plot unfolded, we ended up primarily working as smugglers for outlaw farmers, illegal doctors, and subversives propagating media that hadn't been corrected by Friend Computer's many bureaucratic departments. We even found our way into a secret society that masqueraded as anti-mutant extremists and neo-patriots to dodge police attention, but were actually using sleeper communists to infiltrate Alpha Complex's vast bureaucracy and change the system from within. To improve our station and to make a positive change, the party had to become a gang of neo-patriot vigilantes beating up mutants. Basically, doing hate crimes so that the police would notice us, and Friend Computer would approve of us. This led to the bulk of the campaign. Basically, we made connections as part of our cover once we became troubleshooters. Initially working a secret agenda, but slowly finding comfort as clearance levels and statuses increased. Quality life was cushy and nicer than trying to fight. The more favor is pulled, the wider the network of connections and web of lies grew. And the more we realized it was pointless to try and fight Friend Computer, the more stressful the game got. Everyone was hooked, immersed, grabbed by the short hairs and dragged along for the Orwellian carnival ride. As agendas split, everyone began to drift away from the cohesive, unifying goal of intrusion, and slowly began working each other to benefit themselves, but also their affiliated bureaucratic departments, or social circles. The party devolved into backstabbing and infighting, and we all knew it, but we couldn't say it without giving up the mask of cohesion that made the troubleshooter unit so effective and trusted by Friend Computer. On top of this, doublethink was a major plot element. Things the GM said would just be forgotten, directly contradicted, altered, and insisted to be different. Sector names would change, officials would be replaced without comment, sentences would be changed on the fly, crimes didn't exist, until they did. And friend computer was always right, even when it wasn't, which it always was. The GM took it to a meta level too. Sometimes the game day or time would change and everyone would be pinged on Discord, like the new time was the usual time. This was also over lockdown, so everyone was pretty much always available, and this didn't go into dickish territory of interrupting work or anything like that. Sometimes the party would be asked about a session that never happened, or one that everyone had attended except for one player. When friend computer asked about or referenced events that never happened, we had to decide to play along or question it, unsure of how it would react. There's not much in the way of specifics I could share that would make much sense in isolation, since much of the horror took place as a backdrop or accompaniment to the surface game of being black shirts who hunted down subhumans, thought criminals, communists, who were both subhuman and communist, and regular criminals, when laws arbitrarily existed. One specific example of how the GM broke the party went like this. A character constantly questioned friend computer about memory transfer between clones on death, questioning his humanity, which is something that friend computer didn't approve of. So he kept his anxiety and dread to himself, but had mental breakdowns over existential terror and dread about how genuine his existence was. This led to him being arrested and thrown into an asylum to cure his subversive thoughts. They had him naked in a cell, and they abused and doped him up on drugs to try and reprogram him. When he pleaded on his knees about how sorry he was, and how foolish he was, and how much that he loved friend computer, the staff were confused. He was never considered a subversive. He was being held there to cure his faulty memory, cue more drugs and therapy, and when he passed memory tests, he asked to go, but the staff were confused. His memory was never a problem. Simply his cognitive abilities. This continued until he was mentally destroyed by drug use, utterly docile and submissive due to the abuse, and the party found him doing public service, sweeping a sidewalk in a bombed-out neighborhood. He was unable to speak and flinched when spoken to, and instead of helping him, the party had to disavow their relation to him in order to protect themselves, since they had rent coming up and needed to pay to keep their apartments and buy groceries this month. So that session ended with everyone sitting in the group's apartment, stunned and watching children's cartoons, which was a part of the plot to keep everyone on the mental level of children, while also processing the fact that we just betrayed one of our own, knowing everyone would do it again, and it was only a matter of time before it happened again. And then the anthem played. Everyone stood and saluted, and thoughts were refocused on the next troubleshooting assignment. It was the most fun, engaging, enthralling, and immersive campaign I've ever been in, all the way up to its dramatic conclusion. And that GM is never allowed to run Paranoia again. Well guys, for once this is a horror story where it's actual horror, not like, bad, but actually something that was intended, which is simultaneously a rare thing to happen, especially in these stories, but also not a very easy thing to do. I can't imagine the amount of work that the GM put into this, just thinking of all the different ways to screw with the party both in and out of game, and coming up with reactions of how any of this would play out before it even happens. I will also say, though, that this kind of sounds like one of the old psychology experiments that I don't think are really allowed to be done anymore. But that's it for this one. So as always, have a good one.